All right, we're back to the Michael Lofton show here on Reason and Theology, going to review some comments from the last few days. I just went through the comment section, grabbed some screenshots of various comments that I want to interact with. It's not very easy responding to all of the comments in the comment section, so I have to be selective here. And it's sometimes a little bit easier to explain some of these things in a video response rather than typing it all out and stuff like that. So that is what we're going to do here. But first, I wanted to let y'all know about the fact that I will be in Rome. Yes, you heard that correctly. In Rome, Vatican City. Here we come for a couple weeks. In fact, through Holy Week. So I will be there, Lord willing. And I certainly want some suggestions from y'all of, obviously I know I need to go to St. Peter's and a few other places, but I want suggestions from y'all on what I need to do when I'm in Rome. So I want some tips, pro tips, from some of y'all vets who have been there before, know where to go, know where not to go, stuff like that. So be sure to let me know that in the comment section. I would certainly appreciate some feedback from y'all. And hey, if you're in Rome, reach out to me. Let me know, and we'll see if we can maybe meet up. Like I said, it'll be for a couple weeks going through Holy Week. And after that, I return back to the States. Oh, and by the way, hit that subscribe button. Help me grow this channel. If you appreciate the content here at Reason and Theology, you want more people to see it, and be reached with the content that I've been producing. If you enjoy it, you want others to see it, please hit that subscribe button and the like button while you're at. That will certainly help this channel grow. Okay, so let's start with the first one. This one looks like it's from an Eastern Orthodox commenter. Always appreciate when I get interaction from the docs online. All right, so this one is about my video where I go over Agatho's letter. It's just a short, but I show it's kind of like a skit. And Eastern Orthodox is reading Agatho's letter at the Sixth Ecumenical Council and then becomes really confused because it teaches papal infallibility. So I can only imagine, how that really goes over for the few that actually have read the councils. Because unfortunately, like many Catholics, most Eastern Orthodox don't actually sit there and read through the councils. They're just as bad as that as the rest of us, Catholics, and of course even Protestants. And so it's certainly a humorous thing for an Orthodox to be reading the Sixth Ecumenical Council and be confronted with that. So the commenter says, it's funny how Catholics read church history. Okay. All you could do to prove the papacy is delete the context, the things that were said throughout church history, which this video demonstrates it, or to use forgeries as Rome always did. Okay. All right. Come on now. You can't come to my channel with this level of apologetic. You're going to have to step it up if you really want some serious interaction. Okay. Let me address it, though, for the millionth time. The context, as I've shown whenever I go through, and I've done it in half a dozen videos, when you go through Agatho's letter read at the Sixth Ecumenical Council, which was accepted by the fathers of the council, they praised it, they accepted everything in it, they even cite his Petrine privilege whenever they receive the letter. The letter that the council accepted clearly articulates papal indefectibility in its teaching office, and it locates that in the divine promise of Jesus. When Jesus told Peter, your faith will not fail, Agatho then applies that to all of his predecessors and then says that this will apply to all of his successors in perpetuity because it will be undefiled unto the end. And that is why even Eastern Orthodox scholars recognize that, yes, this is the seeds of papal infallibility that you find at Vatican I. This is it at the Sixth Ecumenical Council. And then you have guys like Schmemann who try to dance around it and say, yeah, it really looks like they're teaching the papal claims, but it can't mean that. And then they can't really explain it because there's an internal inconsistency here. So the context actually supports what I'm saying, and doubly so because it shows that it's actually a divine institution when we speak of the papacy and its indefectibility and its teaching office. So you just need to read the context to know that. Clearly, you've never read it. And so this weak argument of, oh, you guys take things out of context doesn't work with somebody who actually knows what they're talking about. And so I'll recommend that you start with one video that I did. Let's see what it's called. I forget the title. Something like One Question Orthodox Can't Answer. I was dealing with an Orthodox professor who didn't know what he was talking about ecumenical council, which I found pretty hilarious because he literally trains Orthodox priests and doesn't know the basics of the Sixth Ecumenical Council. This is in a video called One Argument Eastern Orthodox Can't Answer. I encourage you to go and watch it because I go through the Sixth Ecumenical Council. I talk about how that works in relation with the Honorius, and I propose a question that Orthodoxy cannot answer because it has an internal inconsistency here. So I recommend that you actually go and watch that before you comment further. Moreover, this nonsense about forgeries, is that all you guys can ever do? If we're just going to talk about all that Catholics ever do, gosh, all you Orthodox online ever do is say forgery, forgery, forgery. It's not a forgery when I'm pointing to your own sources. I can read from your own sources about the Sixth Ecumenical Council. I don't have to use Latin sources. I'm literally going to read from your own description and from your own account of the Sixth Ecumenical Council. There's no forgery here unless you're the one engaging in forgeries. So stop with this empty rhetoric about forgery, forgery, forgery. It's you guys who were actually engaging in forgeries in the reign of Photius, for instance. And it's also you guys who were using some papal forgeries to bolster the claims of Constantinople. Check your facts. Know what you're talking about before you come to this channel with weak arguments like this, ones that I've responded to 1,000 times. Come on now. Don't try to put a Catholic in their place when you don't know what you're talking about. Okay, so this one, all right, what is this? Oh, this is the post that I did about Boxer, my dog. So Boxer interrupted the stream a couple days ago multiple times. And I posted some pictures of him online. I'll show him here in just a second. But I posted some pictures of him online, and somebody said the Boxer does not look sorry for interrupting my streams. And I reassured them, you're right. He was not at all sorry. And so let me actually show y'all Boxer. Here he is. So here's lazy Boxer hanging around the house. There he is. This is the one who is always interrupting the stream. There he is right there again. And that's the one they said he doesn't look sorry. You're right. Somebody said some comment about like good doggy, good boy, you follow the magisterium. And I said something along the lines of, I am his magisterium. I am the Senate. It's true though. All right. Enough of Boxer. Let's move on to the next one. All right. What's this one? Oh, I think this was this was actually a really good question. I appreciated this. This is from David. Okay. All right, Michael, can cardinals or bishops express their concern that a pope's words in public seem contrary to the consistent teaching of the church? I'll finish the rest of the question here in a moment. Let me answer that one first. Can they express their concerns? Yes. Even Canon 212 allows for laity to do so. Dona Veritatis also gives some guidelines here. So yes, expressing a concern, even publicly, can be helpful for the magisterium. It has to be done respectfully, according to the dignity of the office of the person they're interacting with. So respecting that. Also not using media to put pressure on the magisterium. Dona Veritatis excludes that and says we can't do that. But obviously there's a right way in which we can publicly express some of our concerns. And I think that's even possible for cardinals or bishops. However, I would say in the case of a cardinal or bishop, it would probably be better if they privately reach out to the Pope first, since they have access to the Pope. It's not like the average layman can really get in touch with the Pope. A bishop and cardinal sure can. So it's better for them to go privately to him and express those concerns before publicly expressing those. Okay, so there's more to the question here. Let's see. If so, in what venue should they make their concerns known? Yeah, I think it's best for them to do privately since they have access to them. In some rare cases, could they then also express some of those concerns publicly? I could see that happening. I mean, we would just have to use prudence. We would have to look at the context, look at the situation, stuff like that. It's hard to answer that one with a blanket answer. What if the Pope teaches something in a non-infallible document? So I guess you mean non-definitively, um, because documents per se. Let me just correct that. Documents are not infallible or fallible. Okay, propositions are. So you could actually have in a document an infallible proposition along with non-infallible propositions in the same document. So documents are not fallible or versus infallible. Documents just are magisterial documents. They're authentic or not. They're authoritative or not. Um, but then within them, you can have infallible or non-infallible propositions. But I get what you're saying. Something in a, something that's a non-definitive teaching is what you're effectively asking. So what if the Pope teaches something non-definitively, like an encyclical on the environment that seems to contradict past magisterial decrees? Okay. Yeah, I love these questions. I love that you're asking these questions because this is kind of my bread and butter. This is exactly what this is what drove me to write the dissertation I'm writing on, these kinds of questions. So I appreciate that you're asking these because they're certainly legitimate questions, and they're ones that most people aren't asking in the proper terms. So I appreciate this. Okay, so let's say a couple things. Number one, I already did just recently a video about the question of can the Pope teach in his magisterium on questions like the environment, which the short answer is actually yes, he can teach in his magisterium on questions of science insofar as they impact matters of faith and morals. But I did also address some of the pitfalls that can come with that when a Pope does that, and some of the potentials for error in doing so. So maybe go and watch that video specifically on the question of like the environment. But broadly speaking, what happens if you have a non-definitive teaching that contradicts a previous non-definitive teaching? Glad you asked. Now, I do have multiple videos where I've gone over this in detail. This would be those videos that I've done. I think it's like evaluating magisterial propositions is what I named it. It's certainly in my magisterium playlist. But if you look at Dr. King's dissertation with CUA, Dr. Lawrence King on non-definitive teachings, it's in fact available online for free. I'll have to put a link to it in the show notes. He goes over how to evaluate non-definitive teachings and then how to then compare them to other non-definitive teachings to know which one has a higher magisterial weight. And obviously you're going to assent to the one with a higher magisterial weight if we're even in this position to begin with. If this even happens where one non-definitive teaching is in conflict with another, it's incredibly rare if it even happens. But theoretically, if it were to happen, how do you know which proposition to assent to? The one with a higher magisterial weight. And he gives you specific objective ways to and indicators to identify what is the magisterial weight of one proposition versus another, to know which one is weightier, to know which one is more authoritative. But I did kind of condense those in a video on weighing and evaluating magisterial propositions. I certainly go over it in my course on the magisterium at maximusinstitute.com if you want to take a look at the course, or go to my playlist with the magisterium, and I have videos in there that talk about this in more detail. But I love that you're asking that question. Okay, it seems like cardinals could or should charitably challenge the Pope's words without judging him a heretic. Yes, of course. You can express some concerns and even challenge some things without condemning his magisterium, right? Which is what the person who judges him as a heretic does. So it's one thing to express concerns, even question some things, even challenge some things. It's another to pass judgment on the first see that is judged by no one, according to canon law and church history, and also sacred scripture. So that's part of the deposit of faith, in fact. Oddly enough, I'm seeing Catholics all over the place denying that. And so what they're denying is actually part of divine revelation. So they're literally um, proposing heresy whenever they deny that. They're literally proposing heresy in the name of tradition, which is so funny because obviously heresy is not traditional. So much more can be said there. Okay. Wouldn't they be obligated to call out ambiguity and restate true Catholic teaching? Well, it's not that simple now, is it? Right? Um, when you say restate true Catholic teaching, part of the problem is identifying what is true Catholic teaching, right? And so you don't want to make the mistake of the Protestant error of I, as a private individual, get to identify what true Catholic teaching is over and against the magisterium. That's where you have to be really careful here. So it kind of begs the question, well, how do you identify true Catholic teaching? Well, it's through the magisterium, right? And that's not just through the past magisterium. As we know, with the question of Father Feeney and the Benedict Center, and the response that the Holy Office gave to that, it is the living magisterium, the current magisterium's duty to interpret the meaning of the magisterium of the past. So you got to be really careful here and not, kind of assume or beg the question. However, if it is abundantly obvious, let's say, a pope were to just teach something that is very clearly contrary to some magisterial proposition. There is a duty to, according to Donum Veritatis, to bring that forward to the attention of the magisterium in a very, very humble way, in a very respectful way. Donum Veritatis gives the guidelines for that. But to even get to that point is very difficult because, again, it kind of assumes that, it assumes that we're confident that the magisterium has actually erred here. And that's a big thing to really prove, right? Okay, so how do you explain the correction of John the 23rd in light of what you're saying here? Right, I've done videos on this elsewhere, but I'll just briefly respond here and say the question of John the 23rd was not one of questioning or correcting his magisterium. So for those of y'all who are not familiar, John the 23rd, I'm sorry, 22nd. Why do I keep saying 23rd? 22nd. I do that all the time. I think because there was an anti-pope right around that time who was John the 23rd. And obviously we didn't accept him because literally we have a recent John the 23rd, right? But anyways, John the 22nd, he was known for preaching some homilies that were not actually part of his magisterium, according to him, that were contrary to the long-standing teachings of the church on the question of the beatific vision. He basically said that when the saints die prior to the final judgment, they did not see God in heaven, did not see God in the beatific vision. Oddly enough, some Eastern Orthodox actually hold to that position. Well, he was wrong. There is scripture that contradicts that, so there is scripture that corrects that error. He was confronted by various theologians, and I think even bishops. And he immediately he retracted and he reassured people he never actually taught this error in his magisterium. He was just simply proposing this as a private individual. So those homilies that he was giving were actually not magisterial. They were acts of just a private individual. Okay. Now his predecessor then actually also, successor, puts into dogmatic form the contrary proposition, right? So he dogmatizes that the saints do see the beatific vision prior to the final judgment. So prior to then, it wasn't actually definitively dogmatized, but you could certainly say it was part of the ordinary and universal magisterium. So whenever they're evaluating him and responding to him, they're not condemning him as a heretic in his magisterium as a heresy. as guilty of heresy. They're evaluating him as a private doctor of the church, a private theologian. So it's one thing to correct the Pope as a private theologian. Like if Pope Francis were to say something silly in airplane interview, you could certainly correct that, because he's odds are he's not speaking as the Pope. He's more speaking just as a private individual in such a setting. Assuming that he's speaking as a private individual in such a setting and not as, the papal magisterium or something like that. We could certainly correct that, and we can judge and evaluate his statements there. But that's different than what the Pope actually teaches in his magisterium. It is that the first see is judged by no one. It's that we cannot condemn. So any bishop out there, and there is a bishop right now, several bishops, in fact, and they're under fire right now by the Vatican. One bishop is saying, yes, the papacy has taught heresy in Desiderio Desiderabi. I mentioned that. It's Bishop Strickland, among others. Schneider also signed that document. Well, they're wrong. They're judging the first see because they're judging actually the papacy, and they cannot do that according to the longstanding tradition of the Catholic Church, which I've demonstrated in a previous video just a few days ago. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. So that's the difference, evaluating the Pope as a private teacher versus evaluating the papal magisterium. It's kind of like when Pope Benedict XVI wrote Jesus of Nazareth. He wrote that as a private theologian, and you're welcome to correct any of it. You're not judging the Holy See when you do that, because he did not write that. Even though he's Pope at the time, he did not write that in his magisterium. So again, that's where the difference is. Okay, you say it sounds like you think he did not teach heresy, but didn't he put the idea forward in homilies as fact? I never said that he didn't teach heresy. He did teach heresy, but as a private theologian, not in his papal magisterium. And yes, he did put them forward as homilies. However, keep in mind, not every papal homily is magisterial. We have to consider the context. And in fact, according to John the 22nd himself, he tells you explicitly those were not authentic acts of the magisterium, those homilies. So the Pope himself tells you those were not magisterial. Great questions. I appreciate that one. Thank you, David. We got a lot of mileage out of that one. Let's see. Okay, so William asks, we've been to stop pretending that there is no distinction between words and actions. I think you're trying to say we should stop pretending that there's no distinction between words and actions. Who are you talking about? I don't do that. I make that distinction all the time. If you've ever seen any of my videos, I say our actions need to be consistent with our words. What are you talking about? We can and must judge his actions. Okay, so this is in reference to the post where I show that per canon law in the constant tradition of the church, even going back to sacred scripture, the first see is judged by no one. Obviously talking about his magisterium, not him as a private person or his actions or something like that. We're talking about the papal magisterium. We can and must judge his actions. Right. I never said otherwise. Like that, you're equivocating. You're confusing judging actions versus judging the magisterium. They're not the same. You need to make the proper distinctions. It is our responsibility to do so, since we have to choose whether or not it is prudent to emulate him. Right. I never contested that. Who are you arguing against? Not me. This is why I find it would be helpful for commenters to maybe, instead of just presenting a comment as if it's engaging my content, maybe just ask a question. Hey, are you saying that we can't make a distinction between words and actions? Are you saying we can't judge his actions? Like, maybe ask those questions rather than assert and then end up very clearly showing ignorance of what my position is. If you do that, that will help cut down on the confusion for everybody else who reads the comment section and who may not be familiar with what I say. Because it then just goes to confuse other people and then makes it look like I hold to a position I don't. So what you end up doing is you add to the confusion rather than helping things. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, so this is on my video, New Doctrine Chief Warns Dissenters. Okay. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate your analysis of the interview and your explanation that much of the concern from the traditional side of the church is a reaction to the inaction and silence in the face of modernist movements. It does beg the question of, has the tolerance of sin, or even the appearance of tolerance of sin, created the very division we are seeing today? Yes. Yes, as I've noted, um, a lot of the reactions that we're seeing, especially coming from the radical traditionalists, is a reaction to the fact that we're not engaging in church discipline against radical progressives in as many situations as we should. I know there are instances where some radical progressives have been disciplined. I understand that. What I'm saying is there has been not there's there hasn't been enough discipline. Yes, I understand there's some, but not enough. And in some cases, it's even less than some of the discipline that we're seeing with the radical traditionalists. So it seems unbalanced. So, yeah, if we deal with the church discipline issue, everything, this is why I've said over and over on this show, if we just fix church discipline, the bishops and the pope, if they discipline dissenters more, almost all of the problems in the church would disappear, because almost all of it is based on that. Radical progressives would no longer feel that they can do wild stuff and say wild things. And radical traditionalists will no longer have a need to react against those radical progressives. So it will really just kind of balance itself out if we engaged in better church discipline all around. Unfortunately, it's not up to me or anybody else who's watching this video. It's not up to you and I. It's going to be up to the bishops and the pope. And even the bishops are going to feel like, well, I can't discipline so and so because I might get in trouble with Rome or something. Well, ultimately, you're going to have a strong pope who's strong on church discipline. It starts with the pope. If the pope is weak on church discipline, the rest are going to be weak. And Pope Francis, God bless him, but he is weak there. And I've done a video where I push back on his understanding of excommunication and church discipline. Even though he has excommunicated people and disciplined them, it's very rare. And I think it needs to be done more. And that's not just Pope Francis. Benedict was not strong in discipline. John Paul II was not strong in discipline. Paul VI was not strong in discipline. John the 23rd was not strong in discipline. Did they have some moments of discipline? Yes. Are they horrible people? No. But could they have done better with church discipline? Yes. It's not just Pope Francis. We didn't get here out of nowhere. It's been consistently a lack of church discipline with post-conciliar popes, and not just post-conciliar popes. You have some pre-conciliar popes who were not strong in discipline. But definitely in the post-conciliar era, we're weak in this area. So yeah, I agree with what you're saying. Had corrective action been taken in response to the modernists, we would not have the disciplinary actions taken against Cardinal Burke and the apostolic visitation of Bishop Strickland. Well, let me fine-tune some of this. First of all, it's they're what you're addressing is not so much modernism, it's more neo-modernism. The modernists were disciplined under Pascendi very, very, very strictly. By the time some of those things were lifted, it was no longer a problem of modernism per se. It was more of a neo-modernists. It was more of an adapted version of modernism. Was there a lack, and is there a lack of discipline among the new modernists, the neo-modernists? Yeah, that's my view. We would not, if there was more discipline, we would not have had the disciplinary actions taken against Cardinal Burke. What disciplinary actions have been taken against Burke? There's no disciplinary actions taken against him, to my knowledge. And the apostolic visitation to Bishop Strickland. Well, yeah, I mean, I certainly have a lot of things to say about Strickland, but you wouldn't have a case of a Bishop Strickland reacting to some of these things if you had better church discipline overall. I agree. But look, two wrongs don't make a right. So just because there's a wrong of church discipline and a lack thereof doesn't mean we get to then go and do bad things ourselves. Two wrongs don't make a right. But yes, these wrongs that we're seeing from the radical traditionalists are in reaction to a legitimate wrong that they're critiquing with a lack of discipline in the church for the radical progressives. So, in other words, the concerns that some of the concerns that radical traditionalists have are legitimate. They're legitimate concerns. In some cases, they blow them out of proportion. In some cases, they fabricate things and make up controversies that don't actually exist. But in other cases, they actually do have some legitimate concerns about real problems in the church. And if those problems were dealt with better, you wouldn't have the radical traditionalists. At least in my opinion, you would. I don't see why they would exist at that point. They would be much more balanced. Okay. All right. So another one on my video short about Agatha and papal infallibility at the Sixth Ecumenical Council. All right. Let's see. This person says, I don't understand what this guy is saying. Papal supremacy wasn't even a thing back then. Oh gosh. Even your own, assuming you're Orthodox, even your own Orthodox scholars will tell you otherwise. Of course it was. They will tell you about the seeds of papal infallibility at Vatican I right there in the first millennium among your own ecumenical councils. The Sixth Ecumenical Council is one example. The Formula of Hermisdus is another example. So yes, it certainly is. Among all of your saints, many of your saints in Eastern Orthodoxy who affirmed papal infallibility, they would articulate it as the indefectibility of the teaching office of Rome. That's the same concept as papal infallibility. So of course it is. You need to do a deeper dive into the church fathers and your own councils, assuming you're Orthodox. What else we have? Father James Altman becomes a set of a contest video short that I did. Okay. All right. This person says, what if Father Altman is correct? Well, he's not. And it's like saying, what if the Muslims are correct? Well, they're not. So why are we asking these what ifs that we know are not true? What if Jesus didn't rise from the dead? What if we find Jesus's bones tomorrow? What if God doesn't exist? Why are you playing these what if games with me? We already know it's not true. What will happen to those who follow the Pope and his false teachings? Okay, well, if Altman is correct, then Pope Francis is an anti-Pope, then people are following an anti-Pope. So I'm following an anti-Pope. But the point is he's wrong. And we can know he's wrong, and we can know Pope Francis isn't an anti-Pope. Start with the universal and peaceful acceptance of the church, or of the papacy. That's a doctrine you need to look into, and that already applies to Pope Francis. Therefore, he's not an anti-Pope. You can know that with moral certitude. So the burden of proof is on you to show that he isn't the Pope, and everything that Altman gave are really horrible arguments that most of them aren't even true. They're not even legitimate criticisms. And in the cases of any legitimate criticism you can bring against Pope Francis, none of it demonstrates he's an anti-pope or overturns the fact that we had peaceful and universal acceptance of his papacy upon his election, which heals in the root any canonical defects. They continue, let us pray harder because we are near the end. Stop it. No. Every single generation thinks that they're at the end. Stop it. You sound like a Protestant. When I came from Protestant circles, that's all they ever talked about is the book of Revelation is describing this or that helicopter. The visionary, John, he couldn't actually tell you what a helicopter was at the end in this vision. And so this locust is this and that kind of helicopter. And this beast here is actually Saddam Hussein and it's Barack Obama and it's this. Stop it. Stop. This is unhealthy. They say, read the prophecy of Our Lady of Fatima. Are you kidding me? Of course I have. Who do you think I am? You think I've never read Fatima, even though I have dozens of videos about it? Lady of La Salette. Again, do you think I've never read Our Lady of La Salette? I've done videos on it and I've corrected this already. Our Lady of Fatima doesn't promote the idea that we're at the end times. And neither does Our Lady of La Salette. What you're pointing me to is an addition added to Our Lady of La Salette, that was not approved by the Pope. It's on the Index of Forbidden Books. So you need to do your research. I have several videos on this. You're pointing me to a fabrication added to an approved prophecy, and the fabrication is not approved. It actually is on the Index of Forbidden Books. Check your facts. But these people just continue to promote this nonsense and never actually take their own advice when they say, read this, read that. Yeah, do that yourself. It doesn't back up what you're trying to prove. Ask for the grace to know the truth. Oh, stop it. Oh, stop. Stop. Of course, we need to ask for the grace to know the truth. But you're already assuming you know the truth whenever you just say, oh, well, I'm asking for the grace for it. So therefore, I'm not going to be deceived. I know a lot of Protestants who feel that way and think that way. What if Father Altman is right all along? What if he's wrong, as I've already shown? Then you're promoting a schismatic, and you're promoting and endorsing sin, and you're doing what Satan does. Well, what if God didn't really say? God didn't really say. What if? You're backing the wrong horse. Let's see what else we got here. On my Mike Winger short on why Catholics turn to the early church fathers. Mr. Lofton, debate the separated brother Mike Winger. He needs to be educated. Okay, well, Mike Winger already said that he will not engage me, even in a discussion. So there you go. Okay, so this is on one of my posts where I said we have entered a new era where regular schmegula degla laity think they can anathematize the Pope. It's a good old Cardi B reference there. Where regular people, regular laity think they can anathematize the Pope. It's a pretty novel phenomenon that has absolutely no historical traditional backing to it. So this person says dogmatic councils can anathematize a pope and other high-ranking clergy. You literally just espoused the heresy of conciliarism on my channel. This is heresy. Like that is the heresy of conciliarism right there. And first of all, there's no such thing as a dogmatic council. There are ecumenical councils which can teach dogmatically, and also in areas of discipline. They can teach in different ways, right? There's no such thing as a dogmatic council. That's a misuse of the term. But you're saying an ecumenical council can anathematize a pope. No, but what you're getting confused by is the Sixth Ecumenical Council anathematized Honorius, but it's not the council that had the authority to anathematize him, as I've already shown on the channel. It was the fact that Pope Leo II gave his approbation to that condemnation. So you can have a sitting pope judging and anathematizing a previous deceased pope. So it's not a council judging the pope per se. It's actually a sitting pope with his brother bishops at a council judging a predecessor pope. That is how, again, the Eighth Ecumenical Council understood it. I just did a show on it yesterday, I think. And I walk you through the acts of the Eighth Ecumenical Council, and I show that to you. So it's not a council that can judge a pope, but you could have a sitting pope, a current pope, with his brother bishops in a council, judge a predecessor deceased pope. That's the only way you could ever have a judgment of a pope. But you cannot have a council apart from a pope, and you cannot have a bishop judge the Holy See. That is his papal magisterium. You can't have that by divine institution and also per canon law in the constant tradition of the church. So yeah, high-ranking clergy, no, you're denying an essential truth of the Catholic faith. Okay, this is on my video, Bishop Strickland's pastoral letter on the synod. Somebody says here, let's see. I agree with you on the nature of the synod of bishops, but given that nature, it doesn't seem to be particularly synodal, historically speaking, as a non-authoritative papal instrument, and the procedure for the synod on synodality, especially as there is a de-emphasis on the bishops by perhaps having non-episcopal voting members, who it would seem are the central subject in any teaching on synodality, it itself doesn't seem particularly synodal. Okay, there's some truth to what you're saying, which I've already said on this channel. I'll re-emphasize it here, however. Insofar as what you're saying being true, as I've noted, the synod on synodality is not actually a synod, and that's why it's a misnomer, and that's why I think we need to change our language that we have for it in canon law. It's a poor use of the term synod. Because synods historically, we have had synods historically. That's the normative way in which the church has taught historically, through synods, local synods and ecumenical synods. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with synods, local, national, ecumenical, general, whatever. Nothing wrong with that. But they actually did have the authority to teach in their own territories. Whereas the Synod of Bishops actually has no magisterial authority per the Code of Canon Law, as I've demonstrated. What was it? Was it Code 343? Canon 343 of the Code of Canon Law? Yeah, it's Canon 343. It is for the Synod of Bishops to discuss the questions for consideration and express its wishes, but not to resolve them or issue decrees about them, unless in certain cases the Roman pontiff has endowed it with deliberative power, in which case he ratifies the decisions of the Synod. So it does not have any magisterial authority. That's not an organ of the magisterium. So in that sense, I agree with you. This is a poor use of the term synod. Just call it a consultative body, because that's all it is. That's all it is. It's a consultative body. Call it that, though. Don't call it a synod, because that gives people a confusing message, because they then end up thinking it's a council, and it's not. It's a council of advisors, not a council of teachers, and that's where we're equivocating on the term council and synod. And so, as far as its subjects now having an involving laity, oddly enough, we had laymen vote at the Council of Constance, which is an ecumenical council. So I don't know if you're going to be consistent here, because you literally have an actual ecumenical council that had lay votes. And in the case of the Fifth Ecumenical Council, you literally have a layman dictating to the bishops what the outcome is in advance. But I understand what you're saying when you say what's called a synod on bishops. Okay. Well, yeah, we don't need to call it a synod of bishops if we're going to involve a lot more priests, deacons, and laity. This is why I say the synod of bishops is neither a synod nor is it entirely of bishops. It's a misnomer all around. It's like the worst thing you could call it. It's not a synod. It's like the Holy Roman Empire. It's not holy. It's not Roman. It's not an empire. It's like, let's go ahead and change this. But hey, if you can get that message to Pope Francis to adjust canon law and change the name, I'll back it up. I'll sign that petition. Okay. Can we judge the Pope the case of Dioscorus of Alexandria? Okay, so this is in my short about Dioscorus, and the fact that the Eighth Ecumenical Council showed that Dioscorus was condemned for attempting to judge the Holy See, which the fathers of the Eighth Ecumenical Council said nobody can do, not even a patriarch. When Dioscorus of Alexandria, the patriarch of Alexandria, who was at the time the second in the church, when he tried to judge the Holy See, he was condemned for it. That's what I demonstrated. And that's not only factually true, again, that is what our Eighth Ecumenical Council says. But this person says Eastern Orthodox here. This is misleading. All right, let's hear you out. He was condemned for not attending a thrice summons and was made clear in the council acts. This is a case of both and, not either or. I don't like the Protestant either or. You know, this is something where you could clearly understand it's a both. He was condemned not only for a thrice summons, he was also condemned for rashly judging the first see. And if you read the Acts of Chalcedon, I'm pretty sure it's actually in the first session of the Acts where that is noted. So it's a both and, not either or. Number two, he says he was not condemned for rejecting Leo's tome. Yes, he was. It's in the first session. It's in the first session. Go and read it. It's available in English by Father Richard Price. He translated it. I highly recommend you read it. It says Leo's tome was accepted only because it agreed with Cyril's theology. Incorrect. It was accepted in part because it agreed with Cyril's theology, but that is not the only reason it was accepted. If you read St. Leo's epistles, and he is a saint in your own church, he is a saint in Eastern Orthodoxy. If you read his own epistles, which the Orthodox receive, in fact, you have an entire ecumenical council that accepts Leo's epistles, as well as Augustine, by the way. Just throwing that one out there. But Leo's epistles, if you read them, he makes it clear, even prior to the calling of the Council of Chalcedon, his judgment, his tome was already definitively established. In other words, this was an act of papal infallibility according to Leo himself. He says there's no need for Chalcedon. His tome has already definitively judged the issue. The only reason why he acquiesced and allowed for Chalcedon to be established and to be formed is so, he says, that a fuller judgment may be offered. Now, again, this is a pope who says and believes his teaching is already definitive. How can you have a fuller judgment on something definitive? Exact same way that you could have that today with papal infallibility. Yes, you could have a pope who comes and teaches something by himself infallibly, sure. But wouldn't it be better to get all your brother bishops on board? Wouldn't it be better for them to all express that same judgment? Obviously. And so that's what's going on here. But don't reduce it to somehow it's only because Chalcedon evaluated it and or because Chalcedon said that it agreed with Cyril's theology. Again, it's an all of the above. It's a both and. It's not an either or. All right, let's continue. This one is on my video about the history of papal criticism, a brief history of papal criticism. This person says, hello, Michael. I cannot find some way to contact you through email or any other means, so I decided to leave a comment on your videos. As an Orthodox Christian, I obviously dispute the idea of papal infallibility, and I've watched a few of your videos where you defend the idea of papal supremacy. However, even if I could concede the idea of the Pope being supreme bishop, I would still claim the idea of papal infallibility goes too far, and that is a huge jump from saying that the Pope has jurisdiction over the whole church to say that the Pope can make infallible statements. Actually, it's not a huge jump, and here's why. If you look at the history of papal infallibility, it was an extrapolation of papal supremacy. If the Pope has papal supremacy, if he has jurisdiction over the entire church and his teaching authority, he cannot bind the entire church to err. Therefore, his authority has to be infallible. You see how that works? The entire church can't be bound to err. But if the entire church is bound to his teaching authority, his teaching authority, therefore, has to be infallible. You see how that works? But number two, again, your own sources. Formula from Isdus, Sixth Ecumenical Council, among others, among Orthodox saints, both popes and non-popes, teach that. And I have multiple videos about it. I highly recommend you go and watch them. So it does follow from papal supremacy, and your own sources affirm it. Your own councils affirm it. And so if you're not going to be internally inconsistent, you have to embrace papal supremacy and infallibility properly understood. Is there any evidence that in the early church Christians believe in papal infallibility, or is it papal infallibility justified through development of doctrine? It's a both and. It's a both and, not an either or. Yes. Formula from Isdus, Sixth Ecumenical Council, Leo the Great, quite a few other popes too. I know I've done several videos on them. Start with those, however, and let's go from there. Is it also a development, though? Yeah, in the way it's expressed. I mean, seed form, it's biblical, right? It's there in Scripture. But in the way it's expressed, in the way it's articulated, in the way it's understood and defined, yeah, obviously there's some fine tuning that takes place over time. We limit papal fallibility to certain acts of the Holy See. It's not him whenever he says something flippantly as a private individual. So there is some fine tuning where we express the setting of this authority. Good question. This person says, so what will be the excuse when the Pope eventually comes out and affirms same-sex relations? This will happen within the next 10 years. Surely you're not talking about Pope Francis, who says that homosexuality is a sin and we can't bless it. So I'm assuming you're referring maybe to the next pontificate. This is again just similar to what happens when we find the bones of Jesus tomorrow. I'm sorry, by you even asking the question that way shows me you don't have the divine virtue of faith or the theological virtue of faith. You're lacking the theological virtue of faith by even saying it that way. It's like saying, what happens when we find out God doesn't exist tomorrow? Well, are you sure that you have supernatural faith? Why is that a possibility for you? If you have faith, that is not a possibility for you. So I don't find this kind of rhetoric helpful. This person says on my video where Taylor Marshall anathematized Pope Francis, when is it too far? The Pope is wrong. He can say anything and do whatever he wants when it hurts the church. No, that's not what the dogma says. That's a caricature. That's a straw man. Again, the teaching of the church is that the first see is judged by no one, and that is part of the dogma of papal supremacy found in sacred scripture. So, no. That doesn't, however, mean that you can't evaluate some of his personal acts and actions and words. Obviously, you can, but you cannot judge his papal magisterium as heretical. You can't pass judgment and say a negative judgment on his magisterium. You can pass a favorable judgment. You're expected to do that. But you can't judge insofar as passing a disfavorable or a negative judgment against his magisterium. Obviously, you need to make some better distinctions here. Okay. This is again my regular schmegler post. This person says, how ironic how traditional Catholics who criticize Vatican II for Protestantism of the church became Protestants themselves. Yeah. Because what Protestantism does is it ultimately puts yourself in the driver's seat over the magisterium. And that's what many people are doing today. They think that they get to say that the Pope is a heretic. And they get to evaluate his magisterium and say, he teaches heresy in this document. Well, you've become a Protestant at the core. Instead of submitting to the magisterium, you are now judging the magisterium. That's exactly what Martin Luther did. It's exactly what he did at the Diet of Worms. Go and read it. It's literally Martin Luther. So it's funny that the same people who are going to criticize Protestantism have become Protestants in that way. In that sense, in that ecclesiological area. Let's see here. Okay, so this is on my video, The Real Reason Pope Francis Restricted the Latin Mass. I grew up Catholic. I left the church in my teen years. As a young adult, I want nothing to do with the Novus Ordo. I came back to God for order, not for a politically infused socialist pope that is against tradition. I want to challenge you and say you're coming to the church for the wrong reasons. That's number one. Number two, the Novus Ordo properly celebrated is good and holy and sacred. There's nothing wrong with it. So you have a misunderstanding there. Socialist Pope, you mean the Pope that literally just condemned Marxism? You mean that Pope? That is against tradition. No, you're simply trying to evaluate the magisterium, admittedly as a perfect person who hasn't really even been in the church for a while. And you're now engaging in Protestantism where you're trying to evaluate the magisterium. You're coming for the wrong reasons, and you're bringing your Protestantism with you. I humbly submit you need to reconsider why you're coming to the church and what your position and role is with the church in relation to the church. You don't get to judge the magisterium. You need to submit to it. You don't get to say this liturgy is politically infused and he's a socialist pope and I want nothing to do with this liturgy. Your heart is in the wrong place. You don't get to make those kinds of Protestant decisions in the Catholic Church. So you really need to evaluate things before you come back. I hope you do. Let's see. This is a person who comments on my exorcist nefarious highlight. Kind of weird how the past couple minutes of the video he started to fade out with static in the mic. Yeah, I've pointed that out. In fact, both times I've had exorcists on, their microphone had this weird staticky muffled problem. That was pretty weird, right? Okay, well, that's it. Those are all the comments that I grabbed this morning. Hope y'all enjoyed the interaction that I had with them. Hope y'all find it helpful. If you want to see more of these, let me know. Put that in the comment section. Of course, hit the like button and especially the subscribe button so you can help me grow this channel. Also, check me out, patreon.com/reason and theology if you want to support me. And there is a link to a GoFundMe and a PayPal there in the show notes if you want to support me through one of those outlets. So certainly consider doing that. We'll see you later. God bless.
If you're looking to buy or sell a home, office, or any kind of property anywhere in the world, you're going to want to call Real Estate for Life, and they're going to connect you with a Catholic agent. Now, that agent will donate a portion of their commission upon sale, and Real Estate for Life will donate 75% of that gift to a pro-life organization at no cost to you. Call Real Estate for Life at 1-877-LIFE-US1 or text them 248-431-1440. If you care about the pro-life cause, call them now.
Hey everybody, just wanted to tell you about my new free ebook, Church Chaos, Biblical Insights for Confused Catholics. If you are a confused Catholic and you're thinking about leaving the Catholic Church, or you're thinking about converting to the church, but you see that there's a crisis in the church and you're just unsure, this is the book for you. Again, it is free. Just simply go to reasonandtheology.com. You'll see a pop-up that comes up on your screen. Just simply click on it and you'll put in your email and it will provide you the free PDF ebook right then and there. Please check it out if you're confused about the situation in the Catholic Church today. reasonandtheology.com.